Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is David Boop. He's an author. One of his books is called She Murdered Me with Science. And yes, it's a take on that great song of She Blinded Me with Science. We also talk about Green Hornet and Kato, Star Wars, and, well, a lot more. So tune in. Hi, David. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am pretty good, except for the heat wave. I am pretty good.
Yeah. I don't know where you're based out of. Where are you?
I'm based out of a northwest suburb in Chicago,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
we don't have the heat wave we had the other day, but it's still hot.
Right.
It's still hot.
Yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin. I know what heat and humidity does together. So, yeah.
I'm originally from New Orleans. Heat and humidity,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. This is
Yeah.
mild compared, but yeah. But we didn't come here
Yeah.
to talk about that. I wanted to, first thing out the box, when I was looking over your stuff, She Murdered Me with Science, and of course, I went to the song, She Blinded Me with
Right.
Science, and I know that was the play on it. So was how did you come about saying, well, I'm going to take this and I'm going to transform it to that?
Well, it was funny, because the book was about probably about three-quarters of the way done. And I needed a title. And I'm a kid, I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up with the 80s, and I just was going through a list like of old kind of pulp titles, right? And it was always, the blonde did this, or the woman did that, or whatever, right? And I was looking at all these titles, and I was like, huh. Well, there's a murder and there's science. It's a weird science sort of thing. So she murdered me with science. And I was like, yeah, that could work. And of course, then it means the rest of the series, when I finally get around to writing it, is all going to have 80s plays on the title as well. The second book, which I'm about three-quarters of the way done with, for the last 20 years, um, is called Murdered in a Mechanical World, and I'm a Mechanical Girl.
Nice.
And the third book will be One Clone Leads to a Murder. So yeah, these have all been plotted out already. So it's just a matter of actually sitting down and writing them. So
That's always the hard part. But I mean, titles itself, it's not easy to come up with titles. And I've based a lot of my titles on my books on song lyrics or, not so much the titles, but song lyrics. And it's kind of finessing that lyric to make it work for you. But titles, I mean, really, that's the thing. People think writers, you just sit down and write. It's easy. It's all going to come to you.
no.
But I
No,
think
anybody
the
who ever said that the book wrote itself is either a liar or used AI. So, no, there is no such thing as a book writing itself. And as far as titles go, I tend to, for the most part, for short stories especially, I'll draw from poetry. Like I'll look for quotes or snippets of poetry and then alter it, or something of that nature. I have a novella, and it's called Stretching the Mystic Chords, which is a line from Abraham Lincoln's inauguration speech. So, just sometimes you just kind of you look around until something just connects with you in the story. Um, yeah.
when did you decide you wanted to become a writer? Or should I say, when did you start writing? Was it in high school? Was it grammar school where you just decided to have this creative burst?
So
Or
I backed into becoming an author. I actually wanted to be a filmmaker. I grew up in the era of Star Wars, of course, and Star Wars had a huge impact on me. And not only did I love the movie, I wanted to know everything about the movie. So I read all of the books, the makings of, and all of that type of thing, and any newsletter, anything I could be a part of. I wanted to get all of that information in. Because eventually I wanted to make Star Wars, my own Star Wars or whatever, right? And so I at the time I did not understand my own self. And much later on in life, in my 30s, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And uh, basically when I was younger, they just said I was hyperactive, right? That was, oh, he's such a hyper child, but we didn't understand, and I couldn't stay focused on things. And one of the hardest things for me to do was to write, um, because I loved writing, but I hated rewriting. Rewriting to me was painful. It was like physically painful if I couldn't get it right the first time. So while I did good in did well in my English classes, um, it was very difficult for me. So screenplays were much easier to write. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna go to Hollywood and become the next George Lucas. My parents had a different idea. They weren't going to allow me to go to Hollywood. They said you can go to school anywhere else but New York or LA, because all that's there is sex and drugs.
And rock
And
and
I'm
roll.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. I said, what do you think I want to go? No, no. But I ended up trying to do the filmmaking thing for a while, but my dad died. That threw me off. I ended up going to broadcasting school at one point. I did everything tangentially to the screenwriting, but never actually had anything necessarily made. Flash forward to, I don't know, the 2000s, somewhere in there, late 90s, early 2000s. And I'm working at a game store, and we're going to have a booth at a fantasy art convention. And the convention has a writing contest, short story contest. And so I write a short story and I took second place.
Nice.
And that kind of said to me, hey, guess what? Maybe you can write. I mean, it was like $50 paycheck, and publication. So I'm like, okay, let's try this out. And slowly but surely over time, I started getting short stories published. I got my first novel published, and so forth and so on. And I have had short films made of my work and so forth. So I have backed into that, and I have my first comic book's going to be coming out next year, and all this kind of thing. So over time, I've kind of achieved some of the goals that I originally set out for, but in a back-assward sort of way. Um,
But that's sometimes how goes. I mean,
yeah.
when I look at my own journey of writing, I have my 30-year novel, which I've used bits and pieces of, but I have a 30-year novel that it will never see the light of day because I started it after high school and it'll never see the light of day. I have my original one that I did start in high school, and but I
Mhm.
never had the confidence. And then one of my friends, she was a member of a group and they were going to put out a vampire anthology. I'm like, vampires, I can do this. And
Yeah.
so back in 2010, I sat down and in 2 hours, I managed to write this short story. Me, who, like you, has to overwrite and just overproduce. And I ended up doing that one and another one, and they helped me edit it. And I ended up winning the Vicious Seduction Award for my
Oh.
story. I didn't get paid. I didn't, thank you. But it was one of those things where it was like, it gave me the confidence that
Mhm.
I can do this. And
Yeah.
then even though I had the confidence, I kind of kicked it around, kicked the can, kicked the can. And then when my husband got dialysis, I was writing at Barnes and Noble, not too far from the dialysis center. And I became friends and they were going to close that location. They had one more new writer's night. And I had been working on this book. And my friend's like, well, if you finish it, you can be in you can be here for this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it pushed me to finish my book. And then I
Yeah.
wrote a second book after that. But that was the thing. It's like you get backed into that. And even when I look at being a DJ, the whole reason I got to become a DJ is I want a pizza off the radio. I answered an ad in the paper. I ended up producing a TV show. The ad was for an actress. So
Yeah.
sometimes you go on this path, you kind of end up where you need to be. But if you take all those lessons that you learned, it enriches you. And
Yeah.
look at where you
I
are
uh,
now.
I took a part-time job when I was living north of Denver, being a costumed performer,
Okay.
like doing things like kids' parties and things like that, big head costumes and everything like that. It was for a company called Party Animals. And here's the funny thing about it is all their costumes were basically trademark infringements. They didn't want to pay the rights to have any of these characters be legit. So we have like instead of Winnie the Pooh, we have Honey Bear. Instead of Mickey and Minnie, it's Mr. and Mrs. Mouse, the big purple dinosaur, and so forth, right? So yeah, that way they could avoid it. But they eventually did get caught and shut down. But one of the coolest things I ever did there is they got hired by a family steakhouse to run these one act gunfights on Sundays, and I got to write them. I wrote the gunfights, so and acted in them because I had done some acting. And so the first one was I was Bad Breath Bart, meanest hombre north of the Santa Fe. Yeah, Santa Fe runs east west. But
Hmm.
and I would die twice every Sunday. And then later on I wrote another one where I got to be the hero this time. I was Brent Monte Carlo instead of Brett Maverick. I was Brent Monte
Hmm.
Carlo. Um,
Nice.
and stuff of that nature. So yeah, it was fun. It was some early writing credit for me, but yeah, it was fun. It was
But
fun.
was your death as good as Pee Wee Herman and Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh
Or Paul
no, that's
Rubens?
that's so hard to top. Yeah. So yeah, I I can't believe they're remaking it again.
No,
I
no.
cannot.
I mean and I love the movie, and then when the series came out, the series is not the movie. And
No, no, it's completely different.
yeah,
Yeah.
the movie
They
was so cheesy and wonderful, and that scene when he dies is just
Oh yeah.
a classic.
Yeah. Oh, even Rucker Hauer's death is
Hmm.
is ridiculous. So but yeah. So yep, um it's funny how you back into these things. It's my first anthology was an accident. When I edited my first anthology, I had no intention of actually editing anthology, especially as quickly as I ended up doing it. But I was on a panel with um, Jim Butcher on cross-genre detectives, because of course, She Murdering with Science, my first
Hmm.
novel is a sci-fi noir, so he's a scientist detective, and Jim, of course, has his Dresden Files, and so we're on the panel and we're talking about cross-genre detectives, and then afterwards, um, I'm walking, and I had done a lot of weird Western short stories at that point. And I just happened to be walking with him down the hall, and I said, "Hey Jim, any of your characters from the Dresden Files, were they around in the Old West?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, a couple of them are long-lived characters that were around at that time period." And I said, "Well, have you ever thought about writing a couple of those stories? Because I'm going to do a weird Western anthology, and I would love to have one of your stories." He goes, "That sounds great. Yeah, let me know." And then so he went off to catch his airplane, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, fuck, now I got to put it together an anthology. Like, I don't even know why the words left my mouth. They just did. And then all of a sudden, I have a Jim Butcher story for an anthology that I haven't even conceived of
Hmm.
yet. So the first thing I did is, being a weird Western author, I started getting the people who were like on my level, semi-pro, ready to push up to the next level. And then I went to my mentors, people like Kevin J. Anderson, Alan Dean Foster, Mike Stackpole, Star Wars connection there, but others that I had at the time relied heavily upon in the early parts of my career. And then, but I needed some other big headliner. And so I just happened to be at a convention in Salt Lake and sitting across the table from Larry Correa. And I said, "Hey, Larry, when did Monster Hunter International start?" And he goes, "Oh, well, they started in the Old West with Bubba Shackelford's Professional Monster Hunters." I said, "Have you ever written that story?" And he goes, no. And I said, well, I'm putting together an anthology and I would love to have you write that story for me. And he goes, that's great. Except that, it has to be published by Baen because Baen has the rights to Monster Hunter. And I said, well, as so happens, I have a meeting with Tony to pitch her the anthology. He goes, oh, she buys it, then yeah, yeah, I'll give you a story. And so he goes away and I go, fuck, now I got to talk to Tony Weisekoff at Bain and convince her to do the anthology. And so as it so happens, I end up going to Dragon Con later that year. Again, thanks to Kevin. And I end up in the Bain, it was called the Barfly Suite at that point, Bain Barflies. And I end up sitting next to Tony and we're small talking it. And she goes, okay, cut the small talk. What are you here to pitch? And I said, I have a weird Western anthology I'd like to talk to you about. And she goes, eh, I don't think Bain is weird Western. I said, I have 8 New York Times best-selling authors, including a Jim Butcher Dresden File origin story and a Larry Correia Monster Hunter International origin story. She looks at me and she goes, you know what? Bain is weird Western. She's like, put the pitch together and send it to me. And I did, and it hit the national bestseller list. #1 on Amazon, #1 or number 39 on USA Today. So yeah, so sometimes we just back into this stuff, all right?
Well, and the thing is, what I was going to say is, what do they teach you in acting school? They teach you in acting school to, if they ask you, can you ride a horse, and you've never been on a horse, you say, yes, I can ride a horse.
Yeah.
You just got to do it
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, yeah, it goes back to the idea when somebody asks you if you are God, you say yes. Ghostbusters. So, but it's like we say in Ghostbusters. If they ask you if you're a god, you say yes.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So you brought up Star Wars a couple of times now, and I have to ask this. So the Zahn books, did you read them?
Yes, of course. The
Are you
first set, I haven't read the more recent ones.
are you disappointed that they didn't really follow the Zahn books and gave us what they gave us?
So here's the thing, I get it.
Hmm.
And, I am a professional, I'm a businessman,
Hmm.
in that regard. Um, there was too much history to go back and try to teach an entire generation of people what had happened in the books. I get that. I do get that. The fact that they're bringing some of the better stuff from those books forward, right, is good. I like that. Am I happy with what they have given us? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Not a fan of the sequel trilogy. It exists mostly to destroy George Lucas, it feels like. Like it feels like they basically took everything that he did and said, we're gonna just erase that, right? That was not my Han Solo. That was not my General Leia. That was not my Luke, right?
Mm.
Not after, 30, 40 years of reading their stories and people capturing the essence of those characters moving forward. So in that, this is where they didn't do the justice, right? It's like, look at what the fans loved about those books, what the fans loved about the comics and the video games and all of that. What were the things, the elements that kept us buying those books, coming back time and time again? And a Han Solo who loses the Millennium Falcon, right? And when their son goes bad, doesn't go to rescue him,
Yeah, that
right?
no.
Yeah, and things of that nature, right? Like how many times were the solo kids kidnapped that the parents went to go rescue them, right? Until they got to the age they could rescue themselves, right? And so it became a thing where I just I watched them but I didn't enjoy them. I kept hoping that they would recapture that sense of family
Hmm.
and adventure, and they never did. It
No.
was just we're gonna redo Star Wars with new characters, and then we're gonna play little twists on the scenes that we know so well, right? Like the whole when Rey and Kyle Ren turn on the Emperor in a
Yeah,
scene that's
yeah,
very similar to the one in the throne room and all that stuff like that. All of these, like, oh, we're going to do, and Star Trek did the same shit with that second film, Into Darkness. It's like, oh, we're going to take the most memorable, powerful scene in Star Trek history and we're going to parody it,
yeah.
right? It's like, it's like you're basically crapping on all of our memories, our emotions of how important those scenes were to us, right?
Hmm.
And you can't give a new generation those scenes. You have to give them their own scenes. It's like you can't just say, "Oh, we're going to have it where Kirk dies and Spock lives," right? And that doesn't make any sense because basically what they did is say, "Hey, guess what? Khan's blood basically makes people immortal." Right? Because they
Hmm.
bring you back from the death. A spoiler, but that kind of thing. And it's like, um, no, give them a scene that's as powerful, but it's theirs, right? And they
Right.
did the same thing with the last Next Generation movie. It's like, oh, give Picard his Khan, right? And have Data sacrifice himself. It's like, no, no, do something different, but as powerful as those same emotions, right? When I write, I may think of those kind of scenes. There's in my Weird Western novel, there's a big death in the second to last chapter. And I wanted that scene. I wanted my Kirk and Spock. I wanted that. But I wasn't going to write that scene. I was going to write a scene that made me feel that emotional. Um, but it's my own characters, my own world. It's not a parody of anything. And you know what they say is like no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. What's
Right.
funny is when I wrote the death scene, I didn't cry. But when the other characters show up and find him dead, that's when I cried.
Well,
Because, yeah.
it's the same thing with acting, though. I mean, that's one thing when I was in acting school, there was a message that he gave us that said you have to live in the moment. And as a writer, if you really are being a genuine writer, you have to live in that moment. You have to feel that. I mean, I spent a Mother's Day about 5 years ago now, and I wrote this scene where this woman is losing her child. I mean, it was a preemie, and she's holding it for the first time, and it's going to be the last time at the same time. And so I'm sitting there writing this and bawling my eyes out.
Right.
And that's the thing. If you're just
Well,
going
you
to
should.
commit it to paper and not have those emotions behind it, if you're not going to bleed, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. What does it say in newspaper? If it bleeds, it
If it
reads.
leads, yeah. I
Or
mean, and
if it
that's the
bleeds, it
thing.
leads. Yeah,
Leads.
but yeah.
And back to the Star Wars thing, one of my biggest disappointments was you had Mara Jade. You had Mara Jade. Mara Jade is a character that is in those on books that had the relationship with Luke where it tested him. It made him, and it
Mhm.
tested her. And that to me would have been something that would have been great to see. Just like
Mhm.
them killing off Darth Maul so early and then
Right.
yeah. So I mean, I love
Yeah.
Star Wars. I was a kid of divorce and my dad would be like, pick me up. Where we're going? What do you want to do today? I want to go see Star Wars.
Yeah.
And for a girl to say that back in the 70s, that was not.
Mhm.
I think I saw it like 20 times at the movie theater because that was my escape.
Yeah, every time they re-released it, I went back, and of course, as soon as it was on any sort of video, I had it. I think I still have my beta video of it,
I got one better. I have an 8 millimeter small. It's only snippets of it, but I
right?
had gotten it for Christmas. It's a black and white 8 millimeter film.
I remember watching it in a store on record disc, not laser disc, but
Record.
record
Mm-hmm.
disc, the ones you had to like slide in
Mm-hmm.
there and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, yeah, I remember watching that. And I went to see it at a drive-in once.
Oh,
So yeah.
did you have the story of Star Wars, which was the either the cassette or the book that had yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I had all the books, all the everything, all the toys, everything. I was very spoiled. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Have you gone to
Um,
Star Wars, one of the Star Wars lands?
no, I haven't had a chance.
Me neither.
Oh, you mean the Disney ones?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I went to the one in LA, the Anaheim. Yes, I did. I was actually at World Fantasy in LA, and I came in a day early specifically, which was also Halloween. I'm a big Nightmare Before Christmas fan, so I got there a day early so that I could go to Disneyland and see the Jack Skellington stuff, and also I did the Galaxy's Edge. So yes, I will tell you. So a long time ago, when I was working at video game stores, I got the opportunity to beta the Star Wars Galaxies, which was the Star Wars MMORPG, right? And it was so cool because it was so immersive. Like I was literally like, "Oh, I'm running around Tatooine. This is awesome." Right? I was enjoying the hell out of that being in the Star Wars universe. When you come around the corner and you see the full-size Millennium Falcon for the first time,
Yeah.
I wept. I'm like, I'm here. I finally feel like I am here in Star Wars. It was that powerful a feeling seeing that iconic ship there, full size.
Hmm.
And, you know, and it wasn't the stormtroopers, it wasn't the First Order, and it wasn't the blue milk or anything like that. It was seeing the Millennium Falcon, and I'm like, I'm finally here. This is as close as I'm ever going to get to actually being in a Star Wars movie. So yeah, it was a powerful moment.
I can imagine. I mean, that's something that you've wanted to do since you were a kid. I remember being at I think it was NAPTY, the National Association of Television Producers and Executives. So this is early or late 90s. And Donnie and Marie were there. Okay. And I had Donnie and Marie's Barbie dolls. So, and I watched their show when I was a kid. So it was like for me, I mean, seeing the Millennium Falcon, I would blow me away, but seeing them was just like, oh my gosh. And in fact, yes, when I'm getting my picture and their autographs, I'm like, I used to have your Barbie dolls. Now,
Yeah,
fun fact, I talked to Lamal recently. We ended up talking about that, and he starts talking about their microphones were so cool. The white ones that they had, I would have loved to have one. I was just like, okay.
right. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't have a pair of purple socks. Yeah, I watched them too. My parents wouldn't like get me those. Like they're like, you're a boy, you don't play with dolls kind of thing, right? And I'm like, I just want the Donnie. I don't want the Marie. I'm not gonna like style her hair. And I was like, oh, he'll be a giant with the Star Wars figures. He'll be like, oh, we landed on a planet with these giants. And it was before they put
I,
out the 12-inch Star Wars figures.
well,
So
if you look behind me, there is the original Leia back there above my
I
head.
see it. I see
And
it.
she
Yeah.
was the hardest doll to dress. I had one dress that I could wear that my dad got me at a flea market, but her hair, once I took those buns out, they never went back. There was no way I
Yeah.
was going to be able to put. They gave him. They had two plastic discs in there, and I also got
Right.
Luke Skywalker, but I broke
Yeah.
his arm the very first day.
Oh. What was it? It wasn't the one he lost the hand on, was it? Because
I don't remember.
you could like rule, you could like justify that. It's like, oh,
Well,
Darth Vader didn't just take his hand, he took his whole arm.
at the time, we didn't know that because it was just Star Wars, and in
Ah,
fact, my dog got a hold of Darth Vader and chewed his arm off. It was a
oh no.
little the little figures,
That's
but
apropos too. In fact,
yes.
actually, I would guess that's why Lucas chose
Yes.
to lose Anakin's arm was because he heard about your dog.
Oh yeah, I'm
So
sure.
that's like it makes sense. No, that's good writing right there. Get that dog, give him a credit.
So, what do you think about Andor?
Oh my God, Andor was so amazing. It was so amazing. It was wonderful. I loved Andor so much. and oh, hated that long break in between seasons, but it paid off. Now, what's funny about it is, okay, so you get to the last episode of Andor, and
Hmm.
of course, the first thing that pops up as soon as you're done is Rogue One, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start Rogue One, and I just want to see how he looks in that versus how he ended
Yeah.
in Andor. So nearly 2 hours later, as I'm finishing Rogue One,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I'm looking for all the inconsistencies between what they created with the character in the series and what he was in the movie. And it's like, wow, you don't see any of the depth of that character in the movie that they brought out in the TV series, which, is kind of sad for the movie because if they had had the Andor series first, and we had that, and then we had Rogue One, then you would have been able to do so much more with that character than what they did in there. He would have been the primary focus, not what's her name, so Felicia Jones.
Well, and
So
that's the one thing I will say. When I watched Andor the first time, or not Andor, Rogue One the first time, and I know I'm a Star Wars fan, but people are going to come at me for this. I really was just like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give
yeah.
a fuck what happened. I had no connection to these people. I didn't give a
Mm.
damn. Watching Andor, and then like you, rewatching it, I was like, okay, yes, it was a much more enjoyable movie, and I had some skin in the game per se because I wanted to
Right.
see how it played. But the first time was just kind of like, yeah, yeah, I know they got the plans, whatever. I don't need the whole backstory.
The main reason that I wasn't just blown away by Rogue One, as a lot of my friends were, was, of course, as a writer, we look at character development, character arcs, things of that nature, plot holes, so forth. And my problem was that, oh, what's her name? What's her character's name? Um, the main
I know. I'm
woman in
trying to
it.
think. I'm trying to think. I
Um, I know somebody will comment, like, how can you be a Star Wars fan and not remember?
Yeah. Well,
Because I'm writing a book with like 300 characters in it. So that's why. But yeah, it's um, Jyn Erso. Jyn
okay.
Erso. So the first time I saw Rogue One, I did not buy her story at all. Like, it's like, why are these people following her on a suicide mission? Like, she's not done anything to earn that kind of loyalty, right?
Hmm.
She has not done anything to earn that. And yet everybody's like, oh, you can have my lightsaber and you can have my blaster and and stuff like that, right? And all that. And the second time I watched it, um, after watching Andor, I
Hmm.
saw more of what they were trying to do with that character. I saw why somebody might follow her into hell, but I certainly didn't see it the first time.
No.
It took a rewatch to get there. But of course, the reason why we have an Andor series is he was an engaging character in that movie, and I can understand wanting to know more about him. And then just watching the whole birth of the rebellion, which was, I mean, oh my God, some of that stuff is so absolutely fascinating. Just like the whole thing with like even finances and stuff. Like you go, oh, Star Wars finances is interesting. Yeah, they made it interesting. Like, how do you fund a rebellion,
Yeah.
right? Like, especially, when you're talking about an entire galaxy of planets and people and so forth. Like, how does that become a thing? Like, it's like, anyway, I
No,
could
I
go
just
down a rabbit
no.
hole.
Here's the thing, because what you're talking about, I rewatched Solo yesterday,
Mhm.
and yes, they're talking at the very end about funding the rebellion.
Right,
So I mean that whether we really admit it, Star Wars, I mean, everybody's like, oh, Star Wars is just a Western. Oh no, there are so many layers to Star Wars, such
right,
as, the metaphysical principles that nobody really talks about. Yes, the
right.
Force, but it's metaphysical. And then yes, when you look at, and we're not going here, we're just bringing this up. If you watch Andor, you kind of sit there and go, wait a second, what are we living in Andor now?
Yeah. Oh
Because
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. What's the joke that they put in bookstores now with George Orwell's fake quote that says, "I wrote this as a warning, not a how-to guide." Right? So Andor is basically becoming the how-to guide for our government. So
But
yeah, this is
and I mean, you can also look at there was the whole when Oliver Stone made Wall Street. I didn't make it as a rule book. I did
yeah.
not, and then we ended up seeing the surge that we did of vulture capitalists coming in.
Yeah.
So it's
Which
sometimes,
we're paying for now with all
yeah,
of the billionaires
yeah.
that are running our government now.
So you have art that, art and fiction that turns into reality because, and then that's the bigger question is, because, some people are like, well, the Hunger Games and Handmaid's Tale, and are we going to get there? The bigger question is, are they making these movies and TV shows? And I'm not doing conspiracy theory, I'm just posing a question. Are they making this stuff to forewarn us, to show us the possibility? Or is it just in good fun and somebody's like, hey, that looks righteous, let's do that?
So one of the things I do is I tutor and teach on the side, and I do a lot of like essay work for kids in high school and so forth. And I don't know how many times I have done um, ADHD. The one of the boys crashed on the island, and uh, it's the one
Lost?
they make every
No.
my brain keeps wanting to go to Children of the Corn for some reason, but it's not that. It's
Malachi.
yeah, no. They remade it recently as the with the all girls one. The oh. See, it's because of this. It's because I keep my brain in this
Oh, yeah.
um um that we need to oh, Lord of the Flies.
Okay.
Lord of the Flies. Okay. So here's the thing about Lord of the Flies. When you're a teacher teaching it, right? And I'm not saying that teachers don't teach this well. I don't think students are connecting with the way the teachers are trying to teach them what Lord of the Flies is. But when you do critical analysis of a book, right, you're supposed to break it down by, you know, who is the audience? What is the goal for that audience? And what tools does the author apply to reach that goal? That's critical analysis in a nutshell. And so, you look at Lord of the Flies and it was written right after World War II, right? And for basically a high class level reader, and the goal was to show how Hitler could manipulate the people and take control of an entire country and start a war, right? Like when you get down to it, that's what Lord of the Flies is. It is a warning, step by step, how somebody becomes Hitler, right? But that's not taught, right? Like they don't teach that that's the purpose of this book. And so when I finally get the kids when I'm tutoring them to understand that, like it's like boom, mind blown for them, right? So going back to your question, right? These movies and so forth. Well, kids don't read as much as they used to, but we do still have Hunger Games, and we still occasionally have, these books that have maybe some didactic sort of meanings behind them. And the question is, are we getting it? Right? Like,
Yeah.
are the people who are reading these books, are they getting it? That these are the warning signs for how somebody comes into power. There's going to be a day when all of this that we're going through now has settled, and hopefully will still be around,
Hmm.
um, that somebody's going to write a book about how Trump got to power, but it's going to be an analogy, right? It's a futuristic version of an animal farm, right? Or something else, right? By the way, was really shocked to find out how much allegory was in Wind in the Willows. until I did a critical read of that, right?
Hmm.
So it's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, okay, yeah, Mr. Badger, ooh, anti-union, huge anti-union. So but and racist. He was very racist. And you go, yeah, someday somebody's going to write the book about what happened here now, and hopefully a generation or two will get it to keep it from happening again. But if we don't keep teaching it, if we don't keep telling people that's what these are for, nursery rhymes were all sorts of warnings for children,
We're
but
we're
easy.
we're living in The Emperor Has No Clothes,
Yeah.
or The Emperor's New Clothes. But I mean,
Yeah.
we have that, and yes, history does repeat itself every 80 years. We have the opportunity to go through something again. And to your point, and this is you said one key word in there, critical. Part of the problem is we don't teach critical thinking in our phone. Why do I need to think that? The phone's going to tell me everything. AI will tell me everything. I don't need to think about it. It'll
Yeah.
give me the answers I need.
Right. Yeah, and most times those answers are inaccurate because AI, we used to have a term, garbage in, garbage out,
Hmm.
right? And AI will only give you what it's programmed to give you. It
Hmm.
is not sentient. It is not to a point where it's actually making its own decisions. God forbid, because then we end up with,
War games.
Terminator. Yeah, or war games,
Yeah.
right?
Either way.
So yeah, as far as that goes, a lot of time AI is going to give you. We were just talking about the whole thing that happened with Worldcon, which I'm going to be going to in Seattle. But I didn't get on programming, and I didn't get on programming potentially because an AI decided I wasn't worth having on programming. You have to look it up. It's a whole thing. But one of the things that happens when you use like Chat PT and so forth, because it was programmed by certain people, it sometimes has a bias based on the people that was programmed or by the material fed into it and so forth to build its consciousness, is the idea that it can be very racist, it can be very biased, and so forth. So yeah, we gotta watch that shit out.
Well, even something as simple as 2 years ago, I could go into Google and look for something that may have been built in the 80s. Now, granted, I buy old travel books and stuff because my books are set in the 80s. So
Right,
they're not going to have that key restaurant or whatever. But I used to be
right.
able to type in something and it would pull it up and give me the answer if I was looking for a law or something. Now, before that,
Hmm.
Google's AI will give me something that I didn't ask for and give it to me in the modern term because I was looking up, I think, emancipation information.
Yeah,
And sure enough, here we are, emancipation in 2025.
yeah,
That's not what I was looking for.
yeah. And kind of to segue over to one of the things I'm here to talk about,
Yes, please.
I this mosaic novel that Arc Manor is releasing, Permutations, a well-world mosaic novel. Um, the books were written in the late 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. The whole series was like a 10-book series. But having to take a look at the way that the world looked in the 80s when these books were written to write a modern book that reflects still the truth of the original book versus the contemporary view of society and so forth. And that becomes a bit of a challenge.
Mhm.
Um, I write almost everything I write is historical in some way. This is one of the few things that is not, except that it is still is because I'm writing about stuff that was written, 40 years ago, right? So yeah, I understand that challenge of we call it retrofuturism is the term that they use, with looking at the past with the eye of today, right?
Mhm.
And I had to do that with She Murdered Me with Science. I've had to do that with the Weird Westerns. And I even had to do a bit of that with this Well World book. So yeah, it's interesting because you get a real snapshot of how different the world is. You know, I write a thriller series set in the 80s with a former FBI agent, and we set it in the 80s because he at the time he was a current FBI agent. He couldn't write anything that the Bureau might have to have him scribble out. And so we said in the 80s because most of that stuff has been declassified by now. And so when we're looking at the 80s, it's like we just had in our news story one of the terrorist groups. And I'm like, they were around back then. And it's, yeah, this terrorist group, Hamas, was around back then, just nobody talked about them, right?
Yeah.
If you were in the intelligence community, right? Because there wasn't a social media. So if the news didn't report on it, you didn't know about it,
No.
right? And now, every terrorist group, every, personage, celebrity, everybody has a social media platform. So we all know about them, right? And it doesn't take long before you find out about them. So yeah. But yeah, Permutations was a very interesting thing to work on. I've edited many anthologies before, but this is the first one that actually is like a mosaic novel that I didn't write entirely myself. So, did you ever read Midnight at the Well of Souls by Jack L.
No.
Chalk? So yeah, it's interesting because, I bought it because it had the word Well of Souls in it, right? So
Okay.
I thought it had some sort of tie into Indiana Jones. So as as a child might think.
Yes, yes.
And it had nothing to do with it. And it wasn't until my cousin actually, who had the first five books, said, read it because it's really, really good science fiction. Well, it's more sci-fantasy we look at it now. It's not completely science fiction. There's also kind of a fantasy element to it, where the science is so evolved that you can't tell it from difference from magic sort of thing. And I loved the original series. Jack L. Chucker, who passed away in 2004, I think it was. He was just a genius, and his number one thing is transformation, right? He's like really big into transformation. And what was really cool about it is he really in the book series, in the trans all of his books, he often transformed men into women or women into men back and forth throughout the course of the story. And it was just something that happened in his stories. It wasn't a big deal. He didn't like,
Hmm.
and people read them and loved them and they bought more of them and the publishers bought more of them. So the idea of transformation was huge for him. And we look at how much trouble we're in these days with the idea of transformation, right? Like, oh, you have to be what you were born to be and all of that, right? And that's ridiculous. And that's something that why permutations is actually really appropriate for right now, because the conceit is that human beings end up on this planet, which was the petri dish for creating all the alien races within the universe. And you have to step through this gate and you awake somewhere on the planet as a different alien. So you transform immediately. But the well computer tends to pick a race that best fits where your problems were, right? So that by you becoming this alien being, you truly find yourself, right? And this theme was throughout all of the Well World books. And you know, Arc Manor, Shahid Mahmood, when he got the rights to the Jack Chalker Library, one of the things he did was re-release Midnight of the Well of Souls. And we were talking about it, and I was a huge fan of the series, obviously. And he said, well, can you write an introduction for the new book? And I said, absolutely. So I wrote this introduction for the book, and it was well received by the estate and people really liked it. So he asked me what I wanted to do next. And again, this goes back to where we started falling into things.
Hmm.
And I said, I want to do an anthology of well-world stories, using authors who were big, either big fans, influenced, friends of, a family member of. We have Jack's daughter writing in this.
Nice.
And I want them to write the stories to honor Jack's legacy. And I found them. I found them. It was because he's not talked about as much as he was in the 80s and 90s, and certainly after his passing. I wanted to get the people who would help bring that legacy forward into a new generation. And so what we did is, to save time, all of their characters wake up on Well in their new body,
Okay.
right, for the most part. And so I wrote bookends, a prologue and an epilogue, basically, that shows how they got there.
Okay.
And so we worked together, with me working with them on their human version of their characters and their backstories and how they ended up there. And then they write their character in the new body, waking up and having to solve something within the course of the story that only they can solve, right? And then there's the epilogue is what kind of legacy did they leave on Well World. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, but I'm dealing with that idea of, this was written in the 80s, even just how we treated women were different in the 80s. I mean, just watch some classic MTV, and you'll know how badly women were treated in the 80s, right? And then versus now. So, yeah, there's a lot of updating you have to do that doesn't override what the author's original intent was.
Right. Right.
Right? So, more's change, people don't, their goals and stuff like that for a story don't. So, yeah.
Well, and the thing is, there were times where we have progressed, and now we're being drugged backwards, and that's where it gets scary.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because how do you recork the genie? How do you close Pandora's box? It's already been opened, right?
mhm,
We're not going to, I mean, that's what happened after World War II, right? And it's like, oh, we gave women men's jobs, while the men were fighting a war, and then you just expect them to go back to being housewives after that?
mhm.
Hell no. They found that they had skills they didn't even know they had, and the feeling of accomplishment that, just being, and not that there's anything about just being a mother, but it can, for some women, it can be limiting. They need to have something else that pushes them, allows them to transform, right?
Mhm.
You transform when you have a child, right? You suddenly now are a mother, but that transformation is one aspect of what makes a woman. And then there's all these other aspects, and not every woman wants to have a child, right? They certainly do not want to be forced into that breeder role,
Well,
right? They want to have something that challenges them and makes them feel like they're contributing to society.
I think that's it. Kind of goes back to labels when you really want to look at the bigger picture here. Because yes, now I mean it would have been just you're a mother or you're a wife. No, now it's a trad wife. Okay, whatever.
Right?
And why do you need this label? And that's the one thing. I mean, I've talked about this before in this podcast because I lost my husband, and as soon as I lost my husband, I was deemed a widow. What does it matter? Why does it matter that I have to? When I divorced my husband, my first husband, I went by single because it's nobody's business that I'm not with somebody now.
Yeah.
But yet
Yeah.
we're gonna, whether it
I don't
be,
want to display that I actually failed at my first attempt at
yeah,
marriage, but
yeah. I mean,
nobody thinks anything when you fail at your first job,
no, I mean,
right?
I don't have a label that says, "Oh, I got fired." But it's the same thing with I love somebody, they died. Okay, why do I need to wear this as a letter? Why do I need to say I'm a traditional wife? Why? Why do we have to have certain roles, gender roles even? I look at there was a because you were talking about changing of sex. There was a woman called, she went by the name of Tula. Her name is Carolyn Cosby, I think. She is a British actress. She had a surgery back in the 70s, and she ended up marrying a man who was wealthy, and she ended up as a James Bond girl. And she was even in one of the Power Station's music videos. So she was doing really well. And there's a big scandal in England when somebody found out that she was trans, and her husband, his family said, we're going to cut you off. So that ended terribly. And then
Right,
she posed for Playboy here in
right.
America. And I had a guy friend who was just like, I really want to see. I really want to see. I'm like, then go buy the freaking magazine. No, I can't buy it. I'm like, just give me the fucking money. I'll buy it. It wasn't that big a deal to me, but I mean, that's the thing. Why does it matter if somebody changes who they are? If I chose to, you know, God forbid if I ended up with breast cancer and I lost my breast, I look masculine. I look like my father. That's not my choice. That's my genetics. So you're going to say I look like a guy then? And you're going to accuse me of being trans? You understand what I'm getting at, though. It's like we
Yeah,
had this narrow mind of we used to think Milton Berle dressed as a woman or Flip Wilson dressed as a woman was hysterical. Now it's like, oh
right,
my God, it's the same
right.
freaking thing as a drag queen. So
Yeah, well, yeah, and but here's the
sorry for the
I'll
rant.
say the
Sorry for
little
the rant.
no. I absolutely totally agree with you. Nobody would ever confuse Milton Berle as an actual woman or Flip
No,
Wilson as an
no,
actual
no,
woman,
no.
right? But there, you take even Marlena Dietrich, who did a really good man. You still know it's Marlena Dietrich, right?
Hmm.
I think part of the problem that some, and not all, because I'm not generalizing here, but for some people, it's like it's almost like the uncanny valley with AI and robots and things like that. We don't feel comfortable being fooled, right? Like we don't feel like if we see a woman, and let's say I'm a guy, I see a woman, and, there's a reaction,
Hmm. It's normal.
right?
Yeah.
And then you find out later, oh, that's a dude, right?
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden now I'm questioning, I get angry because, well, I shouldn't be getting a stiffy from a guy, but there's some of that goes in there
Oh
where
yeah.
people feel very uncomfortable seeing something that isn't what it portrays to be. And again, that goes back to, we talk about the uncanny valley with robots and so forth. It's like we get very uncomfortable when robots look too human, So
Battlestar Galactica, the new one.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Or, literally any show with an AI in it.
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
yeah,
So you have a new comic book coming out, or your first comic book coming out, you said, correct?
yeah, next year we're kickstarting it. Co-written with Kevin J. Anderson of Star Wars fame and Dune and many others. It's a post-apocalyptic sci-fi about giant mechs used as anger management therapy.
Nice. It'll be intense, I'm assuming. Very intense.
Yeah, it's also slightly tongue-in-cheek. So the idea is that our world survived an attack by kaiju, space kaiju, but there's not many of us left. So life is very precious. So even something like getting into a fight can result in you being sent to prison or potentially dying, because we can't have violence. We can't have this going on. So one of the things they have is this thing called the Trivalent program, where they put you in a giant unarmed mech and you go into the abandoned cities and you start reclaiming them by knocking down buildings, right? And so you work with an AI therapist to try to work through your issues, right, while taking it out on all of these buildings. So kind of like a giant rage room, idea. So we have our everyman character who's constantly getting into fights. He obviously has anger issues, and they're like giving him a chance. It's like, listen, we can have you work these on this project that's ultimately going to kill you, or you can try this other therapy. And he decides to try the other therapy, and they give him a big giant unarmed mech. The problem is that his AI therapist is unaware just how deep his issues run and where they spawned from. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We wrote this first as a short story. It was published in a an anthology called Mech Age of Steel. And then I was looking around for projects to turn into a comic book. And I hit upon that. And I said, there's very visual storytelling here. I think that it would make good comic book. And I talked to Kevin, and he's like, I agree. We wrote the script, found a publisher. Publisher loved it, paid for the comic to be made, took it to Kickstarter at absolutely the worst time to put something up on Kickstarter. Kickstarter failed, which was really uncomfortable for Kevin, who has never had a Kickstarter fail, because he's got a real strong fan base, but the timing was horrible. Plus, the company itself imploded, like half of their staff took off and formed another company. So there was like all of these issues inside. And so we ended up with the rights to the comic back, including all the art and everything like that. So we're going to end up kickstarting it ourselves probably next year, unless somebody just shows up and says, we're going to give you money for this, which is so much easier than actually kickstarting it.
Yeah.
But we'll kickstart it. It's called Travailant Rising, and it's going to be a 5-issue series. We're hoping to fund at least a couple of the issues through our Kickstarter. Um, yeah, so there's that one. I also just, speaking of Kickstarter, I just had a Green Hornet anthology fund through Kickstarter, and that was a lot of fun. It's set in the world of the TV series, so the Bruce Lee Kato,
Nice.
and so forth. And these are basically people writing continuations of that, and a lot of great authors. Timothy Zahn is in there writing a Green Hornet story.
Nice.
Kevin again, Bill Willingham of Fables fame, Mike Haspel who writes Warhammer. I mean, there's Keith DeCandido, who's done lots of media tie-in, and some new voices he got to write, and so yeah, it's a really good anthology. The late pledge manager just went up last week, so if anybody decides they're interested in checking it out, you can go to Kickstarter and put in Green Hornet and Kato, Detroit Noir City, play on Detroit Rock City. So
Okay.
it's Detroit Noir City. So you can find the late backer kit there. I've written Green Hornet before, but I just edited this anthology. I don't actually have a story in it, but I have published other stories through Moonstone of Green Hornet. So I just had that go, and then I'm waiting on a contract for another tribute anthology, which I can't say anything about yet because I'm still under NDA. But another big famous science fiction author from the 70s, 80s, 90s, very recognizable name. I'll be doing an anthology revolving around one of his characters from his larger universe. And what else? Um, I'm writing a YA dark fantasy with my cousin about a elven princess in exile in our world, and her overprotective dwarf bodyguard. And I'm doing an amateur sleuth mystery set around the world of beach volleyball. And I am doing these set of thrillers with the former FBI agent Matt Hellman, who's published in his own. He has his own publishing as well, novels and so forth. But I actually graduated high school with him, and when
Wow.
we both found out that we were authors, we decided we wanted to find a project to work together. And I got this invite to Thrill Ride magazine. Blaze Ward is the editor and publisher of it. And when he asked if I wanted to be in Thrill Ride, I'm like, I wouldn't mind working with Matt on this. So we created a character, an expat set in Tangiers during the 80s. So at the height of the Cold War and spy games, and Tangier was a hub for a lot of this. So we set it there, and our guy is info broker, as it were, and he keeps getting caught up in these these games. He tries to stay um, separated from them, working both sides, but certainly
Yeah, of
people end up dragging him into one side or the other. So,
course. Of
yeah.
course. So, is there anything that we have not talked about that you want to add?
Hmm. Um, so Permutations is out now, but we're we're republishing a new edition of it. When we first put it out, we put it out as an anthology, and we were told no, it actually qualifies more as a mosaic novel. Um, and so we're redoing the cover and rebranding it and re-releasing it. So yeah, there are some copies of the one that says anthology still out. You can buy it on Amazon, but there'll be another version coming out shortly that has a kind of a rebranding sort of thing. So, but nothing about the inside has changed other than the title. So, yeah, and that's out from Arc Manor, and like I said, the Green Hornet. That's I also started writing Cthulhu stories. I have a lot, some of them co-written with a fine person named Toby. And Toby and I started writing these short stories, and we've had a couple of them published. And I've also written some of my own solo uh, Cthulhu stories, and one of those just launched this last weekend at a convention called MissCon, and it's called Cthulhu Fakan. And the idea is, what if you ran a science fiction convention over a Hellgate, and the old ones decided to come play?
Ooh,
So yeah, so all sorts of fun, dark, funny, everything in between stories within this anthology. That's out from Impulsive Walrus Press. That just came out this last weekend. Um, yeah, but I have short stories come out every quarter in anthologies. I have over 100 short stories and quickly approaching 200.
a-
I love doing short fiction as well as novels. So there's always something coming out for me. So
and you still have to finish off that series.
I still have the follow-up to She Murdered Me with Science. So
Mm.
this summer I'm working on the follow-up to Drowned Horse. Next summer is going to be the follow-up to She Murdered Me with Science. So
All right.
yeah,
We'll trust you
so
on that one.
yeah, no, that's it's just things happen in life. We talk about these things, and much like what you were talking about, losing people, I lost a lot of people over the last decade or so, including my mother and my stepfather and my biological father. I lost a daughter I didn't know very well, and some dear close friends. And it gets hard when you have that much grief hitting you,
Oh yeah.
to get into like the writer's trance for very long, because it feels like if I'm in there too long, something is going to happen, right? That I've missed, right? And so for a long time, this is why I published so many short stories. It's because I I couldn't get into the trance for any length of
Right.
time to be able to produce whole novels. Um, and ADHD, as I gotten older, ADHD has gotten worse and stuff like that. So, but I'm finally to a point where I'm back to novels and fewer short stories, and it feels good. It feels good.
Good.
So yeah. So yeah. So hopefully you'll be seeing more novels from me in the future.
Well, I thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome. I love just bullshitting with people. It's
Me
so much
too.
fun. Yeah.
Me too.
All right. Thank you.
So I'd advise you to go check out David's projects, which there are numerous projects, and if you can, go fund the Kickstarter for the Green Hornet and Kato, because that definitely sounds like an interesting thing. I hope he gets his comic book funded because it definitely has an interesting and timely take on things. And I mean, when we delved into Star Wars, and yes, we talked about the parallels of what's going on now and Andor. And I think that's the thing. If we pay attention, sometimes facts or fiction becomes facts, whether we really want to admit it or not. Sometimes it just bleeds in. And how do you know that something that you've read or something that you've seen may actually have some basis in a future reality? And I think a lot of that comes down to critical thinking. And recently John Oliver did I'm sure you can find the clip on YouTube about AI slop. And the thing about AI now is it will make you question reality. Unless it is really a botch job, AI is getting better and better and better. And so you have to have a critical eye, discerning palate, to really look at if this is a true story or not. Is it a deep fake? And I hate using that because I don't want to talk about conspiracy theories. But now with the advanced AI, we do have to face the fact that sometimes things can be manipulated. And are we paying attention to those manipulations? Because if we don't, and we just think that everything is taken at face value is true, then are we losing something? Are we losing our ability to think clearly for ourselves? Are we losing, are we allowing people to take us over without any thought in it? Which, like I said, I know sounds a little bit conspiratorial, and I'm not trying to do that, but we have to look at facts, and that's something that gets lost sometimes in translation, especially with AI. And when we look at rights, and yes, I did bring up labels and when we were talking about things, why does it matter what a person is or what a person does? And I've talked about that before. We're all people, we're all human, we all bleed, and at what point do we decide that somebody has more value than somebody else? And why do we care about a person's skin color or their sexual orientation? What does it matter? What does it matter that I love somebody? What does it matter that I divorced somebody? What does it matter that somebody died? I understand when you go to the doctor and the doctor asks you, so, parents living or deceased. Okay, I understand that. And I understand why they ask what they do about health. Because, well, it could be something hereditary and you may have the same thing, which I advise if you have kids and you're listening to this to definitely make a list of what's going on with your health and if you know what happened with your parents' health, because eventually, God forbid something happen, you could pass suddenly and that could be lost. So do yourself a favor and your kids. That way they have their genetic information. But that's a digression. So allow yourself to really think about, why do I label somebody something? You look at where they live and you think of something about them because they live that certain way. But is it the truth? Is it the truth that because a person's skin color is a certain way or because they believe something a certain way that all of those people are the same? And the truth is they're not. And I'm going to specifically say this right now. Because I live in the United States, a lot of people would say, oh, well, you help elected him. No, no, I didn't. I did not. And I wouldn't. And I never voted for him and I never liked him. And I've talked about that before on the show. So you can't necessarily lump everybody in. And I think that's a big problem when we come to talking about the world at large, because the problem is, yes, we get leaders in power, and yes, most of the time they're elected by a majority. But the problem is when they decide to take us to war or take us to a battle that we don't belong in, or to cut spending for whatever reason, is it really something that everybody supported? Is it really something that everybody has agreed on? And if you look at what has happened where I live with the protests, we don't agree. But we know that the world is watching. And unfortunately, almost every time something comes out of somebody's mouth in this cabinet, we're left to facepalm ourselves and go, why are we in this timeline? Why are we here? So please, the people that are listening to this outside of the US, understand it's not all of us that voted for him. And he is not a reflection of all of us. And yes, I'm saying this and I can get in trouble. And oh well. So be it. Because I believe in free speech. And I didn't mean to turn David's little podcast here into this, but since we touched upon Andor, I felt that, yeah, it needs to be understood that very much. I do not support this, and there's a lot of people that don't, and I hope you guys understand that. So, on that note, definitely check out David's product, David's books and stories, and they're definitely weird westerns. That's not something that I would have thought about, but we have the need to escape, and we do break down things. And a story has different genres, but a story is a story, and a genre is something where we need to see where it fits. But sometimes people, human beings, don't have a place to fit. They're just there, they're just them. And we need to get to a point where we understand and accept that and not try to force people to become something that they're not. Because a book, like I said, has a place. So we know where to find it. The person doesn't. So I thank you guys for tuning in. I thank Fast Susie for the music, the intro and outro music. And yeah, I really do thank you guys for tuning in and listening. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.